Okay, I gotta warn you, some of the things I'm gonna say in this video probably come across as kind of cold to the average person, which is not my usual audience, but you never know. Also, some of the things I say might offend a few people or otherwise upset you. If you think that's gonna be you, try and resist the urge to watch it. Or if you do watch it, try and resist the urge to comment, seeing as you walked into it despite me saying, hey, maybe don't. But you know, if you do leave a comment and it's not like particularly insightful, intelligent, interesting, I'm probably just going to ignore or delete or block. So maybe don't waste your time with kind of garbage. Also, to family and relatives in particular, since I have gotten in trouble with some of my YouTubing a long time ago in the past, look, this is just stuff that I actually think and I need an outlet, so just chill, maybe don't watch this stuff. It's up to you. But, you know, especially with family, my family should know, my family relatives now know that I have schizoid personality disorder, which explains why I can be kind of cold, like, especially when I'm not putting on that act to sort of smooth things over and seem like I'm normal, when actually there's different things going on in my head. And with schizoid personality disorder, I don't have the same experience of life, of humanity, of emotions that other people do. I have learned over time that there are certain things I should probably keep to myself so that we don't get more trouble going on and I can avoid that social awkwardness. But yeah, I want to talk about stuff that is actually on my mind. And with the schizoid personality disorder, right, that's very much caused by my situation, having a disabled brother, growing up with a disabled brother, some childhood trauma issues there, and things that have been ongoing. And that kind of brings me to my first reason for why I don't want to have kids. I figured this out when I was very young. I don't know what age I was, but when I was very young, I was like, wow, I am growing up with someone who is basically a baby for life. Like, he's still in a nappy to this day. He's in his 30s, he's still wearing nappies. And as a kid, I was just like, I've already had to deal with a baby all this part of my life. I don't need the rest of my life to have another baby and just like, you know, where is the point in my life where I don't have a baby around? So there's that, like, I decided very early in my life that I didn't want to have kids just on that kind of basis. And then even when, like, you know, even when there's not disability involved, just like having a regular healthy baby is a lot of work. But it also played on my mind, what if I get through this whole period of my life where I've got a disabled brother and then I have a disabled kid of my own and then I have to go through that again? I was just like, I can't take that risk. That risk doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know if there's a genetic thing. Probably not. But what if? What if there is a genetic thing? And speaking of genetics, like, also, I do have mental illness. It's not just schizoid personality disorder, it's also the depression. And now I've worked out that's probably a trauma thing, but there's always the chance that some of that has come to me genetically. And what if I pass that on to another kid that, like, you know, I don't know if you, like, that's kind of an ethical or moral kind of thing, but I'm like, I don't want to have a kid who has to go through that kind of thing, because I'm not enjoying my life. I'm having a terrible life. I'm just here because we live in a society where it's not really acceptable to just exit, and there aren't really options given to people like me to just exit when I want to. So seeing as I have to stay alive, okay, I'm alive, I'm doing the thing, but I'm not going to bring another kid into the world. If I had my choice, to be honest, looking at my life and the amount of stuff that has not been good, I would just choose not to be born if I had that choice. You can see why I told certain people not to watch this video, but that's genuinely how I feel. I have just been through too much suffering, and can you imagine, like, bringing some other kid into the world and dooming them to that? Now, I realize from an evolutionary standpoint, survival of the species, babies are important. Okay, I get that. Just for me, I don't want any involvement in, you know, bringing a life into the world, and I'm not happy with my own life, so that's a thing. Um, yeah, and, you know, I, like, with survival of the species, I kind of don't care about that either. Like, I care about my own comfort, and seeing a society as saying you have to stay alive, I'm like, okay, fine, but you have to make my life reasonably comfortable. And so I'm living with my parents. That's a bit rocky sometimes, but things have eased up a lot as people have realized how bad my mental illness is. Also, like, you know, as long as society stays stable, so, like, we don't have some kind of major war or catastrophe, I'm like, okay, I will hang on to life, but the moment that, everything goes to shit, maybe I end up homeless, maybe there is conflict, maybe there's, some natural disaster, whatever, I don't think I'm going to survive. I'd probably just be like, okay, where's my first exit? So morbid stuff there, but that's my psychology, and I don't want to pass it on. And I realize, even if it's not genetically my mental illness that I could pass on, what if my mental illness means that I can't appropriately care for a child so that they grow up healthy? Because I don't have a lot of that emotional stuff. I realize hormones could change that, but I don't know that I could give a kid what it needs to grow up. Like, maybe from a theoretical perspective, now that I've researched a lot and understand more, but in terms of me genuinely having feeling for a child, I don't know. Speaking of maternal instinct, I care about my dog, but when it comes to babies, human babies in particular, they're actually really ugly. These little red gooey kinds of things, and they're so awkward when they're so tiny. And I used to work in a photo lab, and people bring in their pictures of newborn babies, and they look almost identical, most of them. I mean, what are you gonna get? Maybe a bit of skin color difference. They're all just like these little blobs, and I don't feel anything. I look at them and I'm like, oh, here comes another one. I just don't care for human babies, and most babies of most species are ugly because they come out all like gooey and awkward, and usually don't have any fur or whatever. The only babies that I think are actually kind of cute are guinea pig babies, because they're one of the few species that are born with all their fur, and once the mother like cleans them up, they're ready to go. They have these like awkwardly oversized feet, but they're ready to go. They're walking around, they're going chip chip chip, and they've got fur. They look basically like just a tiny guinea pig with really large feet, and it's a little bit awkward, but they're cute. Other animals, there aren't too many that are ready to go right after birth, and I think the other species that do it, there's maybe like some kind of cattle or, cow related thing, but they're not that cute. The little guinea pig babies, they get my tick of approval. Most other babies, no. I don't have that maternal instinct. And that brings me also to, so like there's reasons I don't want to have babies for myself. I'll get into some others later, but while I'm on the topic of babies being ugly, something about having babies in our society that makes things difficult for me is the societal pressure and the expectation they'll have the maternal instinct. Because, people show me their baby photos of their babies, and I'm supposed to be like, oh, isn't it cute? And I feel nothing, and I look at it going, it looks like every other baby, are you kidding me? But I can't say that to someone because it's their kid, and they do have emotions, and obviously I've worked out that I shouldn't say those kinds of things to people who have children. So yeah, there's that societal pressure for me to like be like, oh, isn't it cute? But there's also the societal pressure for me as a young female to want kids, and I've explained some of the reasons that I'm not into that. But yeah, and I gotta tell you, I'm not that young, so before anyone says you don't know until you've grown up and you just need to meet the right person and blah blah blah, okay, I'm in my mid-30s, I think. I'm at the right point in my life where I can say, no, this is definitely not for me. And I've been through years of therapy as well. Hasn't helped. This is just how I am, okay? I know some people seem to think that I'm like a teenager, and I'm like, I'm not. I'm in my mid-30s. I'm so old that if I'd started early, I could have a child who's a teenager already. So, there's that. Also, at this age is when your reproductive organs are starting to get on the, like, and they're past their prime. So, yeah, I'm not going to have kids. I don't want to have kids being really old as well, and I don't want them to have some kind of, like, my eggs decaying related condition. I don't know if that happens that often, but everything's a risk, and I can't do the disabled kid thing again. I'm still living with my disabled brother as it is, so I think I've done my share of having to look after babies in my life, if that makes sense. Societal pressures, there's all that. And, like, the societal pressure also goes in with the whole, like, asexuality thing, aromantic thing. I'll also mention that I have tried dating. I put a good effort into it, despite not really feeling the things that I'm supposed to feel. I realized in hindsight I went into those relationships for the wrong reasons, and that's probably also partly societal pressure because everyone's telling me, oh, you'll figure it out, and I tried and I didn't figure it out. This is just how I am. What I did figure out is that people are full of bullshit, and this is just asexuality is actually part of schizoid personality disorder, so that all makes sense. Like, my childhood wasn't a good experience, and so I'm screwed up as an adult. So there's that. Yeah, okay, so we'll get back to some other reasons not to have kids. Um, so, with all my depression treatment, I have tried a lot of medications and realized I'm actually quite sensitive to a lot of the chemicals that go into my body, specifically with things that change your mind in some way. It seems to screw up my body in some other way. So, when you're pregnant, there's a lot of hormones that get involved, and I don't know how I would react to that. And there are things like, the types of depression that are associated with pregnancy and, that post pregnancy period, which I don't need more depression in my life or more reasons to be mentally unstable in some way. I know that some people who go through pregnancy, they actually feel really good from that hormones, but for me that's a risk. Also, I really don't like pain, and there is a lot of pain associated with childbirth. There's also a lot of issues that females go with in terms of pelvic floor stuff, and yeah, you can do exercises, but that's another risk. So post childbirth, people have quite a lot of issues if you get unlucky, and I also have like low blood pressure, and I struggle to put on weight my whole life. Like, this is probably the healthiest weight I have ever been, partly because I'm not on antidepressants anymore. But yeah, I just feel like physically I don't know how my body would handle that. And I guess that kind of brings me to the contraception issue. I am on the pill, and I am on the pill back to back. And that is because when I was younger, I got really, really bad period pain. And like, that period pain kind of gives me a view into like, would I cope with pregnancy if I couldn't cope with this intense period pain? Now, I know there's reasons for period pain. I don't know if I have any of those conditions that cause that. But the whole experience is really unpleasant and gross and whatever. So, when I first started on the pill, it was just to like regulate my periods and make them less heavy. And like, you don't actually have periods when you're on the contraceptive pill. It's withdrawal bleeds, which is kind of a different thing. But it looks like a period. When I first went on them, that actually helped a lot with the pain. But as time went on, those withdrawal bleeds actually did start getting more and more pain. And then my doctor's like, well, you can skip a few periods here and there. You just should have a certain number through the year. And I did that for a bit. But every time I had one of those periods, withdrawal bleeds, it was just awful. I couldn't function. So at some point, I think maybe during like my really big depression, the first one that stopped me from working, sort of like 2015, 16, that's when I decided I was just going to go back to back on the pill. And that has really improved the quality of my life. I think it's also stabilized my hormones. So if I talk about my sensitivity to changes in my body, now I'm on a constant pill and it's not like up and down. I think that probably has helped stabilize my mental health. I think long-term viewers of mine might notice that I'm less crazy than I used to be. And I think that's partly growing up and getting mature, but partly also just not having all this hormonal chaos going on, which I know does mellow with age, but I think also just flattening out the hormones with the pill has helped a lot for me. And so yeah, I'm on that back to back. You can imagine if I wanted to get pregnant, then I'd have to stop taking the pill, which is something I don't want to do as well. And yeah, so because yeah, I like at the time when I first started on the pill, like it was so bad that I remember I was at work and I was in so much pain, and I started like, I had to go home. I was crossing the road and the whole world went kind of yellow and dark for a bit. I didn't fall over or anything, but later when I got off the bus, I threw up in the street and some lady had to drive me home, and I was like shaking and my hands were like kind of, I don't know, clammy, and someone thought maybe I had food poisoning, but I think it might have been something to do with the period. It was just really extreme. So I had resisted going on the pill because I grew up Catholic and there's a lot of stigma around that. But at that point, yeah, I went on. I think I was also, that's probably during my first relationship as well. So, I learned a lot from that relationship, even though it was shit. I guess I should mention, like, we did talk about things like that in my first relationship, like, would babies ever be on the cards? And I'm glad none of that happened. And I'm glad we never did the marriage thing, because, like, I did move out for a bit, and there was a bit like, oh, Catholic family, should we get married before that? And I'm so glad that didn't happen. I'm so glad I didn't get trapped in that situation. So that's another thing about kids societally, is then you get stuck with guys who are shit, or else, like, all the complicated stuff that goes on with that. Anyway, so contraception. Okay, so that brings me to, I'm on the back-to-back of the pill, and that's what they do when you're young, because they don't want to do anything permanent to you, because that would affect your fertility. Because what if you change your mind about not wanting to have kids? Now that I'm in my mid-30s, I have wondered, like, occasionally, like, what if, and when I was still having those periods, I was like, what if I just ripped out my uterus and got rid of it, chucked it in the bin? Which is less of an issue now that I'm taking back-to-back pill, because I don't get the period pain anymore. But yeah, in the past, I just wanted to rip it out. In terms of, like, would it be better to have a hysterectomy as a long-term solution, instead of having to take the pill all the time? Because sometimes I wonder if, maybe increasing all the estrogen, female hormones, has that exacerbated my depression. Because there are some things, like with testosterone, I think occasionally I've forgotten to take the pill, so obviously my testosterone level compared to my estrogen level has changed, and some of those days I actually had good days. I was a bit angrier though. This is apparently how sensitive I am, is if I miss the pill I could get angrier just from a tiny little bit of extra testosterone in my system. But like, it does feel like, at least in my, like, what I think that I've experienced, I think it did give me more energy to come off the pill for a bit. So I've wondered, like, is a hysterectomy something I should do? Well, thanks to the wonders of the internet, I watched a couple of videos by trans men who had hysterectomies, and it sounds terrifying, because, like, I think if you don't need a surgery, try not to, like, don't do it. Try not to get a surgery. So one of the trans men had a complication, and it afterwards, and just kept bleeding, and initially it looked like just your normal sort of post-operative thing, but no, they were actually, like, bleeding out, had to go back to hospital, big drama. And then another one, hysterectomy, with trans men, and also, like, a woman who had to get it for a condition, like, it might have been, oh, I can't remember which condition it was, so I won't guess, because I don't want to mislead anyone. I'm sorry I didn't save what this video was. But yeah, it was like a trans man and this lady who had to have the hysterectomy for medical reasons. And once you do that, like, you have to, like, your body isn't producing, oh, I guess it depends if you take out all your ovaries as well, how big it is. But, like, you do have to go on certain medications, like hormonal replacement, depending on what you get done. And with trans men in particular, there's the vaginal atrophy, which sounds terrifying as well. And, like, it's not as simple as just taking out an organ. There's all these consequences that go with it, and all these possible complications. And it just, to me, doesn't sound like, if the pill is controlling the period pain and everything seems fine, maybe there'd be a few benefits to not being on the pill. And I did try a different pill that had less of one of the hormones, I forget, to see if that would, and it was actually really bad. So it's better for me to just stay stable on the one hormone. But yeah, since I am stable on the one pill, I'm just like, surgery out of the question. Like, surgery is actually a really major thing. Like, we've come a long way medically and technologically, and it's a lot safer than it used to be, but things still do happen. Things go wrong. There are side effects. And so now I understand, like, in the past when I've mentioned to doctors, like, just get it out, in the past when they've mentioned that, they've been like, oh, that's really kind of a serious thing, but they didn't really tell me any of these details. So thank you, YouTube, to people who've actually gone through it, explaining what can happen and the reality of it, because holy crap. But that, I guess, brings me to gender, seeing as I brought up the trans issue. Because I realize these days there are a lot of kids who are being pressured into these surgeries. And I just think, like, and also with the way that TikTok is, it's actually young people promoting it as well. And I think a lot of the young people don't realize quite how big a deal it is. You want to sterilize yourself, fine. I don't really care, because I don't give a shit about the species, to be honest. And if you don't pass on your genes, well, someone else's genes will get passed on, and hopefully they're more sensible people. I mean, I'm sorry for you if you change your mind, but especially the parents pressuring the kids to do these things. Hey, it's your fault if you can't pass on your genetics, and I realize that is important to some people, to pass on their own genetics. I don't care if I ever change my mind about kids, I'll just adopt, because then you skip the ugly baby phase. A bit like, when you get a dog, like I didn't have to give birth to my dog, thank God, and he's so much cuter than a human baby. It's just a shame that he doesn't live as long, but hey, he's healthy for now. Anyway, no, with the trans stuff. Okay, I consider myself to be a gender non-conforming person in the old school sense of gender non-conforming, which means I'm female, but I don't conform to feminine stereotypes. I don't like this modern thing where it's like, if you act like a boy, now they say you are a boy. I feel like the whole gender movement has gone backwards. Like, we did so much work to break gender stereotypes, and now they're trying to bring it back and use them to create these new labels. And they're like, no, don't do that. I just want to be me and not feel pressure to do anything in particular based on gender labels and all that. So that's what I mean by non-conforming in the old school sense, is I'm a female, but I do whatever I want. If I want to do feminine things, fine. If I want to do masculine things, fine. I don't care. If we ever get to a point where that modern gender ideology becomes mandatory, I'll just come out as agender, because I don't believe in that concept of gender. When I was growing up, gender was just a word to talk about biological sex without making kids giggle in the schoolyard. Like, that's what gender meant. It wasn't separate from sex back then. So yeah, like, if they ever say that no, gender is definitely different, I'll just come out as agender, because I'm already an atheist, and the way I feel about God is the way I feel about this version of gender. I don't believe in it, so I'll just be agender. I won't change pronouns. I don't care. You can call me whatever you want. I've had people mistake me for a dude in the past, and I actually find that kind of funny. I've told that story plenty of times before. But anyway, no, with the gender, so I consider myself a gender non-conforming person because I do whatever I like. But also, like, when I was really young, I think I did have something like gender dysphoria, because I did want to be a boy. In hindsight, I realized that's because, one, I have a disabled brother, and two, I have another brother and I feel like they both got more attention from my parents, because my parents are sporty people and they're not emotionally sensitive, so they wouldn't know how to deal with a female. And also, I was the oldest, so it was kind of assumed that, I was okay. So the two boys got more attention. They were allowed to do more stuff, because especially back when I was growing up in the 90s, like, I was still being told to be more ladylike and all this kind of stuff, whereas I saw the boys being able to do whatever they wanted, more freedom. So in hindsight, I can see that's probably where my child brain was like, I want to be a boy. And, males are physically stronger, and there's a lot of other stuff. And so this is all pre-puberty, that I wanted to be a boy. And I was a boyish kid as well. I never really went into some of that feminine stuff. I think also my mum has a bit more of that boyish kind of streak, so I probably picked up some of that from her and just the situation that I grew up in. But I did learn, I think this is still pre-puberty. At some point I learned that, like, getting a sex change was an actual thing. But then I watched an episode of Blue Heelers, which is really old, and they had an episode where the dad was letting this girl transition into a male, and the mum was separated, and they was trying to get the kid back, and there was like this whole hoo-ha. And there's a point where the mother explains to, I think, one of the cops, like, what's involved in a sex change for a female in terms of downstairs, and it was so that kind of made me think, okay, I don't want that, that's fine, I'll just be a girl, that's fine, I'm not doing that, it's not even like a real. So yeah, you can't, like, I realized at that point you can't actually become the other sex, like, it's all this cosmetic kind of so that kind of cured me a little bit of that. But then I learned about, and I don't know how I learned about this pre-internet, like, I didn't have internet access for quite a while when I was young, but I learned about this tribe where a lot of the kids are born as female, but they have this genetic quirk where around the age of 12, I guess puberty, suddenly, like, the testicles will drop and they'll actually turn out to be guys after all. And so I was waiting, like, okay, when I turn 12, maybe that'll happen to me. That was my next best bet in terms of becoming a boy. Didn't happen. Got up to high school. Well, no, actually, before high school is when I started getting the boobs, and it was kind of a weird, awkward thing because, my boobs were asymmetrical and they kind of grew asymmetrically as well, and I was sort of like poking around like, what is... Okay. A long way to go through that sort of gender story to get to the issue of what they're now calling top surgery, mastectomies. Okay. Because that is something, if I had grown up 10 years later into this world of interesting gender stuff, I think I could have very easily fallen into that sort of non-binary kind of thing. I've always been interested in androgyny. These days less so, because I just don't give a crap about gender, but that is something that I thought about when I was younger. And so, speaking of the hysterectomy thing, I also thought, well, this is something that I still consider for myself, is if I ever get signs of breast cancer and, it seems like the best thing to do is to just get rid of my boobs, I'd probably not put implants in. I'd probably just go flat. Especially, it's probably more accepted now, so I could probably get away with it and people wouldn't be like, ooh, I'd probably, socially get away with that. But yeah, again, with the like top surgery stuff, when I've looked at that, there is that sort of complications in terms of like, they have to have drains put in and all this kind of stuff, and there are things that can go wrong, and like, your nipples can be out of place, and once again, if you can avoid surgery, just don't do it. Is kind of like, I'm very squeamish though. Like, I don't have any tattoos or piercings. I don't even have my ears pierced, even though that was the fashion for all the kids in primary school. Anyway, yeah, no, and like the idea of breastfeeding as well. Like, I don't need my boobs. They're just in the way. When they first started coming up and I realized I couldn't really lie flat on my stomach anymore, like, fully comfortably, that was not a good moment. And then also when you're playing sport and they bounce around, like, I have very small boobs and they still bounce around. The only reason they even grew to this size, I think, is because I went on the pill. They were even smaller before I went on the pill. And so, like, if I'm doing any kind of physical activity like that, I have to wear a bra. I hate wearing a bra. I don't wear a bra most of the time. I can't even remember when the last time was that I wore a bra or anything bra-like. I only have sports bra type stuff. I've never been measured for a bra, so I wouldn't even know what my size is, but it's probably almost non-existent. Although there was someone who left a comment on, I think, my schizoid video saying I couldn't be schizoid because I was raising my arms to show off my vaguely prominent breasts. And I'm like, mate, I think that's a problem with you, not me. Like, who even thinks like that? Anyway, so that's just a little ramble about gender. Is like, I can understand where the kids are coming from, and I, if I grew up today, I probably would want to have the hysterectomy, the mastectomy, and just do that sort of neutral, non-binary kind of look. But I think, now what I know about surgery nowadays, and also, okay, I think what finally got me out of the whole, sort of gender dysphoria kind of stuff, like, just stopped me thinking about gender in general and, like, the shape of my body and the limitations of my body. Well, first of all, the thing that helped me survive, I think, was fantasy. And schizoids do get into fantasy. I've tried to avoid it in later life because I think it actually screws me up a bit more, especially have some dissociation issues, and it does tend to exacerbate that. But one of the things that got me through being smaller and weaker and all that kind of stuff is I got very into fiction and fantasy involving telekinesis. Like Pokemon, the psychic Pokemon, telekinesis in particular. Not so much the mind reading. I think mind reading would be a bit... So definitely the telekinesis. And so it's like, okay, if this exists, then you can be small and tiny and still do a lot of damage. And it was all about destruction. There's a reason my channel is called Destroy America, which I realize sometimes the subtitles, if you turn them on, when I say, hi, I'm Destroy America, it'll say, hi, I'm Destroy America. And that's not what I'm trying to say at all. Thank you, YouTube captions. But it gives me a laugh. Yeah, no, telekinesis. So that... especially when you're younger and you kind of hope that magic is real, and, especially like, characters like Sylar, I'm like, fuck, yeah. yeah, I'm screwed up. That got me through some of the thing about being female, the things I didn't like about being female. But I think what really changed my mind in the end is, like, you know, once I got over the fact that there is no magic in the world, life is dead boring. What I find amusing about being female is the fact that I'm a metal vocalist and that I've been able to cultivate this really horrible demonic sound so that people think that, oh, you know, she can sing these high notes like, ah, la 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 la. I don't have a song like, you know, what do I sing? When leaves have fallen and skies turn to grey. Like that kind of shit. And my dad's like, oh, you sing so nicely. And then I'll turn around and be like, you know, horrible noises and basically seem possessed. That is what made me think actually being female is kind of fun, because if I was a dude, people would expect ugly noises. Because let's face it, like, what is that? There's that Seinfeld quote when they're, you know, Jerry's girlfriend is always walking around nude and he decides he wants to walk around nude as well, and it just ruins the relationship. And the joke was sort of like, you know, a woman's body is more like a work of art and it's meant to be looked at, whereas the male body is very utilitarian and kind of gross. I don't remember exactly how the quote goes, and probably if anyone young is watching this might not even know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Seinfeld is... Yeah, anyway. No, yeah, no, like with the boys, like, there have always been those, you know, macho, masculine, male metal singers who have gone from your power metal, like, you know, high scream kind of things, which I don't really perceive as a scream, but then they've gotten into more and more extreme kinds of metal until you've got basically Cannibal Corpse, like, like that, you kind of expect that a guy, would be able to do that. But when it's a small female who can sing like high pretty notes, you don't suspect the small females, and I find that kind of fun. And I wouldn't be able to have that sort of effect if I was male. So that's how I think that is what ultimately got me to be at peace with being a female. I think also getting into goth fashion helped, but as any one of my regulars can tell, yeah, I've tried to do those videos when I was getting free clothes, but now that I'm not getting free clothes and I don't really go out very much, I haven't really had much motivation to dress like that. And when I do dress goth, I tend to do more of the goth punk, more masculine kind of look. I have dresses, I just can't be bothered. Like, maybe if I'm on stage or if I had a photo shoot, sure, I'd go in a dress, but mostly still into the boyish stuff. Boyish stuff is more comfortable. And yeah, like, so it's really the metal vocals that fixed me on gender, sex, whatever. Being female, because now I can screw with people in that way. It's the same, sort of similar to looking young. I mean, looking young is a bit more annoying because I think, well, for one thing, I constantly have to show my ID to get into gigs when I actually do bother to go out, which, you know, after a while, people are always saying, oh, you should take the compliment. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what people think of me. I don't care about looking young. I just don't want to have to, like, shovel through my bag to try and find my ID every time and show it to the guy and be like, and have him look at it and go like, why does it say you're 34 when you look like that? Why would you make a... Like, one day they're going to think it's a fake ID. I sort of live in like, oh God, what if that happens? Like, I don't care about looking young, so I don't understand when people are like, you should take it as a compliment. I'm like, I've always looked like, I don't care. What's wrong with old people? I used to hang out with my grandma, and like, you know, I even went on a busload of little old ladies down to Canberra to look at some art stuff and then back up. And both on the way and on the way down and on the way back up, we stopped in the middle for scones. We had scones and tea. You know, I don't have that sort of prejudice against old people as long as they're treating me fine. So looking young, I don't care. But the benefit of looking young when I'm not is that it kind of does mess with people when they find out how old I am. And yeah, I've just told you I'm 34. I'm only 34 for a few more days though. So genuinely mid-30s, I can make decisions about whether or not I want to have babies, and I've decided no. But yeah, no, I should just keep telling people I'm a vampire and I'm really old, because it's close enough to the truth, really. Anyway, so yeah, that's like stuff about having babies, my attitudes. I maybe upset a few people, but I did warn you, And I suppose there could have been some people who are upset with my views on gender as well. That's not to say, okay, I should add, with gender dysphoria, different issue to what some of the, like, the more trendy stuff is going on. Like, gender dysphoria sounds like it's really difficult, whereas I think what a lot of people are going through at the moment is more of just like an identity confusion, which is kind of normal when you're in your teens and your early 20s. That's part of discovering who you are. So having a little bit of confusion, I understand though, because like I went through a lot of identity confusion and I'm still confused. But yeah, like while you're in it, it's tricky being young and not really being sure about your place in the world, and especially as someone like me, like going through childhood trauma and not understanding why I felt the way that I did, with all that and everything screwing around in my head. Like, I can sympathize with what those kids are going through, especially with society pushing them into this weird gender stuff. But I think also it is kind of like a parody of what gender dysphoria really is. And I am concerned also that with the attitudes swinging that far into that level of craziness, like, it was one thing to get the LGBT rights, but then it's gone too far, and now I think a lot of the world is sort of pushing back against LGBT again. So like it's the same thing where, well, I guess it's all connected, like, this whole thing about fighting against stereotypes. Like that women should be a certain way. Like when I was little, being told to be ladylike, like we fought so hard to break all that down, and then it's come back, and it's sort of same with the sorry, I'm getting a little bit tongue-tied. It's the same thing with them, is like they fought so hard to just be allowed to hold hands in public, and now because things have gone too extreme and these people are sort of misappropriating the trans experience, it's sort of changing things back. So now the acceptance that LGBT fought for, they're now getting a lot more hate again. And I can understand all the different bits and pieces, and it's so damn complicated, and it's such a shame. Like, I think this is just human habit though, is we always go to these extremes in groups. Once a group of people get together, it just gets more and more extreme, and the pendulum swings, and then it's got to swing back. And like, how do you stop it in the middle where it belongs? Tricky stuff, especially somewhere like America. I think America has much more problems, and like in Australia there are pockets of that kind of extreme, but I think people generally treat each other better. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to watch. Anyway, so I hope I didn't upset too many of those people. I am kind of saying that because I feel like I have to say that, both for societal reasons and also for YouTube censorship reasons, but I think, as much as I don't feel a lot of things, I can kind of like logically see why I should be concerned as well. So it's like, yeah, genuinely, I hope I didn't upset anyone, but also I kind of don't care at the same time. I have a lot of these like contradictions in my brain, and I think that's part of the mental illness and just the way that my brain works. But yeah, those are some thoughts on having kids and gender stuff, my own issues with gender. And I know, I still look like, a small boy to a lot of people. I don't care. Call me what you want. But, yeah, anyway. Oh, I can't believe I got that video done. I've got to go and walk my dog because he's upset with me. My little baby, that's all I need. I'm a fur parent. And, stuff and things, join my cult. And join me for my live stream on my birthday. Unless you're watching this in like a month's time and it's just kind of random, and I'll be 35 then. But bye!